Her ex planned to shame her at his wedding until she arrived, married to the mafia boss. The alarm clock on the bedside table buzzed with a relentless, mechanical insistence, signaling that it was 5 a.m. Emily Carter did not groan or slap the snooze button. She simply reached out a slender hand, silenced the device, and sat up in the darkness of her efficiency apartment. The air in the room was stale, recycled from the day before, carrying the faint scent of lemon polish and old paper. This was her sanctuary, small but impeccably tidy, a space where every object had a specific place, because chaos was something she could no longer tolerate in her life. She moved through her morning routine with the precision of a soldier. Shower, coffee, emails. By 6 o'clock. She was dressed in her standard uniform of black slacks and a charcoal blouse, neutral, professional, and designed to make her blend into the background. As an events coordinator for Harborview Events, her job was to make other people shine while she remained the invisible force, ensuring the champagne arrived on time and the flowers did not wilt. She checked her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles lingered beneath her eyes, stubborn shadows that no amount of concealer could fully hide. She was working too much. She knew it. Her friends, the few she had left, told her she was running herself into the ground, but exhaustion was a useful tool. When her body was tired, her mind was too foggy to wander down the sharp, jagged paths of memory. Overworking was not just a necessity for her bank account, it was a sedative for her soul. Emily grabbed her tote bag and opened her front door to check the mailbox in the communal hallway. It was early, but the postman had been late yesterday, and she had forgotten to check upon returning home. A stack of bills and flyers sat inside, but one item stood out. It was a heavy, cream-colored envelope, the kind made of cardstock so thick it felt like a slab of marble in her hand. Her name was calligraphed on the front in shimmering gold ink. Miss Emily Carter. A cold prickle of unease danced down her spine. She did not run in circles that sent gold-embossed invitations. Standing in the dim hallway, she slid her finger under the wax seal and tore it open. The text inside was elegant, mocking in its formality. Together with their families. Ryan Blake and Charlotte Hale request the honor of your presence at their marriage. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Emily leaned back against her doorframe, the breath leaving her lungs in a sharp whoosh. She read the date, 2 weeks from Saturday, and then the venue. The Glass Pavilion, a cruel irony. The Glass Pavilion was one of the premier venues in Brookside, a place she managed events for at least once a month. It was a space of light and joy for her clients, but seeing it printed here, linked to his name, turned the beautiful architecture into a prison. Memory, unbidden and sharp as a razor, sliced through her carefully constructed defenses. 6 years ago, she'd been 21, a scholarship student with paint on her fingers and dreams that felt within reach. Ryan Blake had been the golden boy of the campus, heir to a logistics empire, charming and persistent. He had courted her with a focus that felt like being bathed in sunlight. He made her feel chosen. Then came the positive test. She remembered the way the sunlight had seemed to drain out of the room when she told him. She had expected fear, perhaps, but also support. Instead, she saw a mask slip. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating assessment. "It is not the right time," he had said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I have a future to build. We cannot have a mistake dragging us down." He had put cash on the table. A thick envelope. "Go take care of it, Emily." When she refused, when she told him that this was a life and not an inconvenience, the golden boy became a monster. He did not hit her. Ryan was too smart for bruises. Instead, he systematically dismantled her sanity. He told their friends she was hysterical. He told his parents she was trying to trap him for his money. He gaslit her until she questioned the ground beneath her feet, calling her crazy every time she cried, painting her legitimate fear as mental instability. And then, the stress had done what he wanted. She lost the baby 3 months in. She remembered the sterile white of the hospital ceiling. She remembered the silence. Ryan never came. He sent a text message 2 days later saying it was for the best. and then he blocked her number. By the time she returned to campus, the rumors had solidified. Emily Carter was the obsessed ex-girlfriend, the unstable charity case who had invented a pregnancy to cling to the Blake fortune. She had dropped out, unable to bear the whispers, and rebuilt her life brick by painful brick. Now, standing in her hallway. Emily stared at the invitation. Why? Why would he invite her? They had not spoken in years. She was a ghost from a past he had successfully buried. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jarring her back to the present. She pulled it out and saw a notification from a group chat, a collection of old college acquaintances she rarely engaged with but had never gathered the courage to block. The messages scrolled past. Rapid fire, Jessica. Did you guys see the guest list? Ryan is actually inviting Emily? Mark, talk about a saint. After everything she put him through? Jessica, I know. He said he wanted to be the bigger person, invite her to show there are no hard feelings. Honestly, she is lucky to even be allowed in the building. Emily felt the bile rise in her throat. Ryan had won. His version of the story was the only one that existed. To them, she was the villain, and this invitation was an act of benevolent forgiveness from a man who had destroyed her. She shoved the phone back into her bag, her hands trembling. She could not deal with this now. She had a job to do. She had to be professional. She had to survive by noon. Emily was at Moretti's. It was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, a place of dark mahogany, velvet booths, and lighting that made everyone look rich and dangerous. She was there to finalize the menu for a corporate charity gala she was organizing for a tech firm. The budget was tight, the client was demanding, and the logistics were a nightmare. She stood at one of the high tables near the kitchen pass, her tablet open, cross-referencing dietary restrictions with the chef's proposed appetizers. "No," she said to the sous chef, keeping her voice firm but polite. The client specifically requested no shellfish on the pass trays. "We cannot have a cross-contamination risk." The kitchen was loud, a symphony of clattering pans and shouted orders, but Emily held her ground. From the shadows of the upper mezzanine, a pair of dark eyes watched her. Adrian Moretti stood with his hands in the pockets of his tailored suit pants. He was a man who occupied space with a terrifying stillness. To the public, he was a successful restaurateur and a property investor. To the underworld of Brookside, he was the head of the Moretti crime family, a man who valued discipline over chaos and silence over noise. He watched the woman with the clipboard. He had seen her here before. She was always rushing, always apologizing for things that were not her fault, yet she was ruthlessly efficient. He liked efficiency. He noticed the way she stood, spine straight, despite the fatigue evident in the slope of her shoulders. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been glued back together, showing the cracks but refusing to shatter. Marco, his cousin and second in command, stepped up beside him. "The shipment is clear," Marco said quietly. "No issues at the docks." Adrian nodded, his gaze never leaving Emily. "Good. Keep it quiet. I do not want heat while the mayor is dining here next week." He turned his attention back to the floor just as a group of loud young men entered the bar area below. They were already drunk, despite the early hour, wearing suits that cost more than most people's cars, but wearing them with the sloppiness of men who had never worked for $1. Adrian frowned. He recognized the loudest one, Ryan Blake, the son of a real estate tycoon. Adrian tolerated his presence only because the Blake family spent exorbitant amounts on wine. Emily had moved from the kitchen pass to a quiet alcove near the bar to take a call from her florist. She ended the call and leaned her head against the wall for a moment. Closing her eyes, she did not see Ryan and his 3 groomsmen slide into the booth directly behind the partition where she stood. "I am telling you, man, it is genius." One of the groomsmen laughed, the sound grating and harsh. Emily froze. She knew that voice. It was Brad, Ryan's college roommate. Ryan's voice cut through the air, smooth and arrogant, carrying easily over the partition. "Charlotte is fine with it. I told her it is about closure, about showing everyone that we have all moved on." "But inviting her?" Brad asked. "Is that not risky? What if she makes a scene?" Ryan laughed, a low, cruel sound that made Emily's blood turn to ice. "Letter. That is the point. Look, everyone knows the rumors, but some people still think I was too hard on her. I invite her as a charity case. I let her sit there, alone, looking pathetic. And then, during the toast, I am going to make a speech, a pause." Emily pressed a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. "What kind of speech?" another friend asked. "A tribute to forgiveness," Ryan said, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "I will talk about how hard it is to deal with mental illness in partners. I will bring up the obsession. I have even got some old voicemails she left me years ago, edited, of course, to play on the screens. It will be hilarious. She will look like a total psycho, and I will look like the benevolent groom who tried to save her. It clears my name completely with the in-laws." The men at the table erupted in laughter. Emily felt like she had been punched in the stomach. It was not enough that he had broken her heart. It was not enough that he had destroyed her reputation. He wanted to use her one last time as a prop in his theater of cruelty. He wanted to parade her trauma in front of 200 of the city's elite just to polish his own ego. She needed to leave. She needed to get out of there before she vomited. She pushed off the wall, turning blindly toward the exit, but luck was not on her side. As she stepped out from the alcove, Ryan swiveled on his bar stool. His eyes widened, then narrowed into a smile that did not reach the predatory glint in his gaze. "Emily!" he boomed. Spreading his arms, the group went silent. Emily stopped, trapped. "Ryan," she said, her voice sounding thin and brittle to her own ears. He hopped off the stool and walked over to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive scotch and expensive cologne. "I was just talking about you. Did you get the invite?" "I did," she said, clutching her clipboard to her chest like a shield. "You have to come," Ryan said, his voice dropping to that faux sincere register he had mastered. "Seriously, Em, Charlotte really wants to meet you. It would mean a lot to me. To us. It is time to put the past behind us. Do you not think?" His friends watched, smirks playing on their lips. They were waiting for her to crack. They were waiting for the crazy ex-girlfriend to appear. Emily looked at him. She saw the malice beneath the smile. He was daring her to say no, daring her to make a scene so he could point and say, "See, I told you. I will check my schedule," she managed to say, her throat tight. Ryan reached out and patted her shoulder. His touch made her skin crawl. "Do that. Do not be a stranger, Emily. We are all adults here." She forced a nod, pulled away from his touch, and turned on her heel. She walked away with as much dignity as she could muster. But the moment she rounded the corner into the staff hallway, a restricted area for employees, her composure crumbled. She leaned against the cool plaster of the wall, gasping for air. Her vision blurred. The cruelty of it was overwhelming. He was going to play edited voicemails? He was going to humiliate her globally? "Here," a deep voice said. Emily jumped, nearly dropping her clipboard. Standing a few feet away was the man she had seen watching from the mezzanine earlier. The owner, Adrian Moretti. Up close. He was even more intimidating. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that fit him like a second skin. His face was severe, all sharp angles and heavy brows, but his eyes, dark and intelligent, were fixed on her with a strange intensity. He held out a pristine white handkerchief. "You look like you need this," he said. His voice was a low baritone, calm and grounding. Emily stared at the handkerchief, then at him. "I am fine," she lied, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Just allergies." Adrian did not withdraw his hand. "There are no flowers in this hallway, Miss Carter." She looked at him, startled that he knew her name. He stepped closer, not aggressively, but with a deliberate slowness. He pressed the cloth into her hand. She took it, her fingers brushing his. His skin was warm, his grip steady. "Did one of my staff upset you?" he asked. His tone was polite, but there was an edge to it, a promise of consequences for whoever had caused this state. "No," Emily said quickly, dabbing at her eyes. "No, your staff is wonderful. It is just personal. I apologize. Mr. Moretti, I should not be back here. "You're working for me today," Adrian said. "That makes you my responsibility while you're in my building. Would you like a glass of water? I need to go," she said, backing away. "I have another meeting." "Thank you." She turned and fled toward the service exit, clutching the white handkerchief like a lifeline. Adrian watched her go. The heavy metal door clicked shut behind her, leaving him alone in the quiet hallway. He looked down at his hand, where her fingers had brushed his. She'd been trembling. He did not like it. He turned and walked purposefully toward the security office. "Pull the feed from the West Bar," Adrian ordered the moment he stepped into the room filled with monitors. "Audio and video. Last 10 minutes. The security guard, a burly man named Sal, nodded immediately. "Yes, boss." Adrian stood with his arms crossed as the footage flickered onto the main screen. He watched Emily standing in the alcove. He saw the group of men. He saw Ryan Blake. "Turn up the audio," Adrian commanded. The speakers crackled, and then Ryan's voice filled the small room. "Invite her as a charity case. Make a speech. Edited voicemails. She will look like a total psycho." Adrian listened to the entire exchange. He watched Ryan corner her. He saw the fear in Emily's eyes, the way she made herself small to survive the encounter. He saw the smug entitlement on Ryan's face, the look of a man who believed the world existed solely to serve his amusement. Adrian felt a cold, hard anger settle in his gut. It was not the fiery rage of a street brawl. It was the icy, calculated fury of a man who decided judgments. He despised bullies. He despised men who used their power to crush those who could not fight back. And Ryan Blake was planning to destroy a woman who was already holding herself together with sheer willpower. "Pause it," Adrian said. Sal froze the image on Ryan's laughing face. "Do we have a file on the Blake family?" Adrian asked. "Just the financials for the restaurant tab," Sal said. "Get me everything," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I want to know who he owes money to. I want to know where he sleeps. And I want to know everything about Emily Carter." Sal looked at him, surprised. "The girl?" Adrian stared at the screen, at the woman who had refused to cry until she was hidden in the dark. "She did nothing to deserve that," Adrian said. "And I find myself irritated by his arrogance." That night, Emily sat on her beige sofa, her knees pulled up to her chest. The apartment was silent, save for the humming of the refrigerator. The invitation lay on the coffee table. It seemed to glow in the dim light. She should burn it. That was what Jenna, her best friend, would tell her to do. Burn it, block him, and move on. But Ryan's words replayed in her mind on a loop. She will look like a total psycho. If she didn't go, he would tell his story anyway. He would say she was too unstable to attend. He would play his videos. He would win. But if she went, she would be walking into a slaughter. She had no armor, she had no money, no status, no one to stand beside her and say, "This woman is valuable." She picked up the invitation, feeling the weight of the cardstock. She felt trapped in a box Ryan had built for her 6 years ago. She was tired of the box. She was tired of being the girl who ran away. "I want to go," she whispered to the empty room. She wanted to walk into that glass pavilion and show him that she was still standing. But she knew, with a sinking heart, that walking in alone would only prove him right. She needed a miracle, or a weapon, and right now, she had neither. The office above the main dining floor of Moretti's was a fortress of solitude. Insulated from the clatter of silverware and the hum of conversation downstairs by soundproofed walls and heavy velvet drapes, the room smelled of aged leather, teak wood, and the faint, sharp tang of gun oil that Adrian Moretti usually scrubbed from his hands before touching any paperwork. Adrian sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. Across from him sat Marco, his cousin and the only man Adrian trusted to watch his back without question. Marco was younger, leaner, with a restlessness that contrasted sharply with Adrian's stillness. "The DeLuca crew is getting bold," Marco said, tossing a manila folder onto the desk. "One of our shipment containers at the South Docks was tagged last night. Just graffiti, but the message is clear. They are testing the perimeter. They want to see if we bite." Adrian picked up the folder, flipping it open with a single finger. He scanned the photos of the defaced shipping container. It was a sloppy tag, bright red paint on gray steel, a childish provocation. "If they are tagging containers, they are desperate," Adrian said, his voice low and devoid of alarm. "DeLuca lost his distribution channels in the East last month. He's trying to provoke a street war to distract from the fact that he is bleeding money. We do not bite. We wait. Increase security at the warehouse by 2 men per shift, but do not engage unless they step onto the property. Let them starve themselves out." Marco nodded, making a note on his tablet. Understood. Smart play. Adrian closed the folder and leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. The business with DeLuca was standard maintenance, a weed that needed pruning. But there was another matter, a smaller, more irritating thorn that had been pricking at his mind since yesterday afternoon. "There is one more thing," Adrian said. Marco looked up, expecting another rival gang or a corrupt city official. "Name it." "Ryan Blake," Adrian said. Marco blinked, confusion rippling across his face. "Who?" "Ryan Blake," Adrian repeated, savoring the distaste the name left on his tongue. "His family owns Blake Logistics. They are minor players in shipping, mostly legitimate, mostly boring. The son is getting married at the Glass Pavilion in 2 weeks. Marco scratched his jaw, looking baffled. "Okay, do they owe us money?" "No," Adrian said. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below where rain was beginning to slick the pavement. "He's just a man who irritated me. I want a full background check. I want to know his debts, his vices, his social circle, and exactly how much of his father's money he has wasted, and find out if he has any leverage on a woman named Emily Carter." Marco paused, sensing the shift in Adrian's tone. This was not business. This was personal. He did not ask why. He simply nodded. "I will have it on your desk by tomorrow morning," Marco said, standing up to leave. Adrian watched the rain streak the glass. He told himself this was just about order. He hated chaos, and Ryan Blake was an agent of chaos. But as he watched the city lights blur, he saw the image of Emily Carter's trembling hands in the hallway. And he knew it was more than just order. It was an instinct he thought he had buried years ago, the urge to stand between the wolf and the lamb, 3 miles away, in a brightly lit boutique that smelled of lavender and desperation. Emily Carter stood on a small pedestal in front of a 3-way mirror. She was wearing a dress that could only be described as safe. It was a pale, dusty rose color, with a high neckline and long sleeves. It was the kind of dress one wore to a church service or a distant relative's funeral. Jenna, her best friend since freshman year of college, sat on a velvet ottoman with her arms crossed, shaking her head. "Absolutely not," Jenna said firmly. Emily smoothed the fabric over her hips, frowning at her reflection. "What is wrong with it? It is modest. It is respectful. It is invisible," Jenna countered. "You look like you are apologizing for taking up space." "Emily, look at me." Emily turned, meeting Jenna's fierce gaze. "This guy, this Ryan, he wants you to feel small," Jenna said, her voice rising with indignation. "He invited you so he could look down on you from his high horse. If you walk in there wearing that beige sack, you are giving him exactly what he wants. You are playing the role of the sad, defeated ex." "I feel defeated," Emily whispered, stepping down from the pedestal. "Jenna, you do not understand. I just want to get through the day without anyone looking at me. I want to sit in the back, witness the ceremony, and leave. If I do not go, the rumors get worse. If I go and try to show off, they will say I am jealous. This dress, it is neutral." Jenna stood up and walked over, grabbing Emily's hands. "Neutral is for Switzerland," Jenna said softly. "You are walking into a war zone. You have 2 choices. M, you stay home, you block his number, and you never think about him again. Or you go to that wedding, and you look so breathtakingly gorgeous that he forgets his bride's name when you walk in the room. You make him regret every single thing he did to you. There is no middle ground." Emily looked back at the mirror. The woman in the reflection looked tired. She looked like someone who was waiting for the next blow to fall. "I do not have the money for a revenge dress." "Jenna," Emily said, her voice cracking. And I definitely do not have the energy, Jenna sighed, pulling Emily into a hug. Then we find a way. But please, take off the dusty rose. It is depressing me. 2 days later, Emily received a text from the manager at Moretti's. Miss Carter, Mr. Moretti would like to review the menu options for the charity gala. He has asked if you could come in for a tasting at 3 o'clock. A tasting was standard procedure, but usually she dealt with the head chef, not the owner. The request made her stomach twist with a fresh wave of anxiety. Had she messed up the order? Was the budget too low? She arrived at Moretti's 10 minutes early, clutching her leather portfolio like a shield. The restaurant was closed between lunch and dinner service, the dining room bathed in a golden, hushed silence. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light falling from the high windows. Mister? Moretti is right this way, the hostess said, leading Emily past the empty tables to a secluded booth near the back, the same area where she had hidden from Ryan. Adrian was already there. He was sitting with a file open in front of him, a cup of espresso steaming at his elbow. He looked up as she approached, and Emily felt that same jolt she had felt in the hallway, the sensation of being fully, intensely seen. Miss Carter, Adrian said, standing up. His manners were impeccable. Old world and polished. Thank you for coming. Mr. Moretti, Emily said, shaking his offered hand. His grip was firm, dry, and warm. I hope there is no issue with the menu proposal. Please sit, Adrian said, gesturing to the plush leather bench opposite him. There is no issue. In fact, the chef is quite impressed with how you managed to balance the dietary restrictions with the budget. I simply wanted to offer you a chance to taste the final selections yourself. A waiter appeared as if summoned by telepathy, placing 3 small, exquisite plates between them. Seared scallops, a truffle risotto croquette, and a miniature beef Wellington. It is on the house. Of course, Adrian said, sitting back. Emily stared at the food. It looked incredible, and she realized with a start that she had forgotten to eat lunch. Again. Thank you, she said, picking up a fork. This is very generous. She took a bite of the risotto. It was rich and earthy, melting on her tongue. For a moment, the stress of the week faded. She looked up to find Adrian watching her, not with the predatory gaze of men like Ryan, but with a curious, steady focus. You work hard, Miss Carter, Adrian observed. I see you here late almost every week. It is the nature of the job, Emily said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. Events do not plan themselves. And yet, Adrian said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious, you seemed distressed the other day. When we met in the hallway. Emily froze, the fork halfway to her mouth. She lowered it slowly. I told you, it was just a long day. I know who Ryan Blake is, Adrian said. The name landed on the table like a grenade. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked around the empty restaurant, suddenly feeling exposed. I reviewed the security footage, Adrian continued, his tone matter of fact. I heard what he said to his friends. I heard his plan to humiliate you at his wedding. Heat rushed to Emily's face, a burning flush of shame that started at her neck and consumed her. He had heard. This powerful, intimidating man had heard Ryan laughing about her, heard the cruel jokes about her mental state. Mr. Moretti, please, Emily stammered, her fingers twisting the edge of the leather folder until her knuckles turned white. That has nothing to do with my work. It is a private matter. Is it? Adrian asked. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. He's planning to make it a public spectacle. He intends to edit voice messages and video footage to paint you as unstable. He wants to destroy your reputation in front of half the city. That does not sound private to me. Emily looked down at her lap, fighting the tears that pricked at her eyes. She felt stripped bare. He is my ex, she whispered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. From college, I got pregnant. The silence that followed was heavy, but not judgmental. Adrian did not move. He waited. He wanted me to get rid of it, Emily said, her voice trembling. He said it would ruin his future. When I refused, he turned everyone against me. He told them I was crazy. He told them I was trying to trap him. And then I lost the baby. I miscarried alone in my dorm room because I was too afraid to call anyone. She took a shaky breath, looking up at Adrian. She expected to see pity. She hated pity. But in Adrian's dark eyes, she saw something else entirely. A storm, a quiet, terrifying darkness that swirled beneath the surface of his calm. After I lost the baby, he spun the story, Emily continued, her voice gaining a little strength from his silence. He said I made it all up, that there never was a baby, that I was just obsessed with him, and because his family has money and mine does not. Everyone believed him. That is why he is inviting me, to remind me that his version of the truth is the only one that matters. She stopped, horrified that she had just spilled her deepest trauma to a client. I am so sorry. I should not have said all that. Please forgive me. Adrian stared at her. He looked at the way she sat, trying to make herself smaller, apologizing for her own pain. He felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it nearly knocked the wind out of him. It was an unfamiliar feeling, sharp and possessive. That kind of man, Adrian said, his voice low and vibrating with intensity, should never be allowed to decide who you are. Emily blinked, surprised by the venom in his tone. There is nothing I can do. If I do not go, I look weak. If I go, I look crazy. There is a third option, Adrian said. Emily wiped a stray tear from her cheek. What? You go, Adrian said, but you do not go as Emily Carter, the ex-girlfriend. You go as Emily Moretti, my wife. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the ventilation system. Emily stared at him. Sure, she had misheard. She let out a short, nervous laugh. I am sorry? You attend the wedding on my arm, Adrian said, his face completely serious. As my legal wife. You are joking, Emily said, waiting for the punchline. I never joke about business. Adrian said, Business? Emily asked, her confusion deepening. Adrian sat back, returning to his calm, strategic demeanor. He picked up his espresso cup, turning it slowly in his hands. Ryan's plan relies on one thing. You being alone, you being vulnerable. If you walk into that wedding alone, you are a target. But if you walk in with me, if you walk in wearing a ring that costs more than his father's house, on the arm of a man who owns half this city, his narrative collapses. No one will believe you are obsessed with a boy like Ryan Blake when you are married to a man like me. Emily stared at him. The logic was twisted, insane, and strangely compelling. And what do you get out of this? She asked, her voice skeptical. You would not do this out of the goodness of your heart. You are smart, Adrian said, a flicker of approval in his eyes. I need something too. My investors. They are old-fashioned. They get nervous when a man with my level of influence remains single. They think it means I am volatile, unsettled. There is a development deal I am trying to close, a massive waterfront project. The city council and the private backers would be much more comfortable signing the contracts if I appeared to be a stable, married man. He looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her face. I need a wife who is intelligent, discreet, and understands how to handle pressure, Adrian said. You need a shield. We can help each other. Emily sat back, her mind racing. It was madness. It was the plot of a bad movie. And yet, the thought of walking into the glass pavilion, not as the pathetic ex, but as the wife of Adrian Moretti. The thought of seeing the look on Ryan's face, it sparked a fire in her chest that she had not felt in years. But, married? Emily asked. You mean pretend? No, Adrian said. I mean legally. A civil ceremony. We sign the papers. It has to be real to withstand scrutiny. Ryan will dig. If it is fake, he will find out. He leaned forward again, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent shivers down her arms. I have a lawyer drafting a prenuptial agreement. It protects you completely. If we separate, when we separate, you walk away with a significant settlement. Your debt's paid, your future secure. And in the meantime, no one touches you. No one insults you. You are under my protection. Emily looked at his hands resting on the table. Strong, capable, dangerous. She knew the rumors about the Moretti family. She knew they were not just restaurateurs. Are you dangerous? Emily asked, her voice barely audible. Adrian did not flinch. To my enemies? Yes. To you? Never. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He did not open it. He just set it on the table between them. It is not just a date. Emily, Adrian said softly, it is a shield. Ryan wants to crush you. I'm offering you the chance to crush him. Emily looked at the box. She felt a strange pull, a terrifying allure. It was not just about revenge. It was about safety. For 6 years, she had been fighting the world alone, looking over her shoulder. The idea of having someone like Adrian standing between her and the abyss was intoxicating. She looked up at him. His dark eyes were locked on hers, waiting. He was not pushing, he was offering. I need to think about it, she whispered. Take tonight, Adrian said, but do not take too long. The wedding is in 12 days. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. She could smell the scent of sandalwood and rain on him. His gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second, a heartbeat of raw, unspoken tension before returning to her eyes. You deserve better than to be that man's victim, Adrian said. Sleep on it. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the restaurant, leaving Emily alone with the velvet box and a heart that was beating so hard it felt like a bird trapped in a cage. That night, Emily lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. The streetlights outside filtered through her blinds, casting stripes of light and shadow across her duvet. The velvet box sat on her nightstand. She hadn't opened it yet. She was afraid of what seeing the ring would do to her resolve. She replayed the conversation in her head 1,000 times. A shield, strategy, mutually beneficial. It was crazy. It was dangerous. Marrying a mob boss, because that was what he was, even if he called himself an investor, was the definition of reckless. But then she thought of Ryan. She thought of the way he had laughed in the bar. She will look like a total psycho. She turned onto her side, pulling the covers up to her chin. She thought of Adrian's eyes, the way he had looked at her when she told him about the baby. There had been no judgment, only a dark, quiet fury on her behalf. She'd spent 6 years being the good girl, the quiet girl, the girl who took the high road while everyone else threw mud. Where had it gotten her? Alone in a studio apartment, terrified of an envelope, she closed her eyes, and in the darkness, she saw Adrian's face. She felt the ghost of his presence, the controlled strength that radiated from him. She felt afraid. Yes, but for the first time in a very long time, she also felt something else. She felt powerful. She reached out in the dark, her fingers brushing the cool velvet of the box. If she said yes, she would be stepping off a cliff. But maybe, just maybe, Adrian Moretti was the one person who wouldn't let her fall. She squeezed the box tight. She was tired of hiding. She was ready to fight. The main dining room of Moretti's was unrecognizable in the harsh light of mid-morning. The chairs were overturned on the tables for cleaning, and the heavy velvet curtains were pulled back, allowing gray daylight to wash over the usually dim, romantic interior. It smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the rich aromas of truffle and wine that usually permeated the air. Emily sat at a corner table that had been cleared for her, her hands clasped tightly around the edge of the wedding invitation she had brought with her. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater, a deliberate choice to be herself, not the professional event planner or the panicked victim. She heard the heavy tread of footsteps before she saw him. Adrian emerged from the back office, accompanied by an older man in a pinstripe suit who carried a leather briefcase. Adrian was dressed casually for the first time she had seen him. Dark trousers and a black button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. He did not smile, but his nod was respectful. "Miss Carter," Adrian said, pulling out the chair opposite her. "Thank you for meeting us. This is Arthur Vance, my attorney." Emily nodded to the lawyer, her throat dry. "Mr. Vance." Arthur Vance was efficient and brisk. He sat down, opened his briefcase, and slid a thick document across the table. "Adrian has explained the situation," Vance said, his voice gravelly. We've drawn up a prenuptial agreement that outlines the terms of the marriage. I encourage you to have your own counsel review it, but Adrian insisted we make the terms as generous as possible to expedite the process. Emily looked at the document, then at Adrian. "I do not have a lawyer," she said, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart, "and I am not signing anything until we are clear on the rules." Adrian leaned back, signaling for Vance to wait. "Go on," he said. "I am not a prop," Emily said, meeting his dark gaze. "I understand that this helps you with your investors, and I understand that it helps me. Handle the situation with Ryan, but I need to know that I still own myself. I need to know that I can leave the apartment when I want, work when I want, and that I am not—" She hesitated, searching for the word. "Owned?" Adrian supplied. "Yes," she breathed. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Vance. "Note that in the addendum, Miss, Carter maintains full autonomy over her career and her schedule, provided it does not conflict with scheduled public appearances, which will be agreed upon in advance." Vance scribbled on a notepad. "Furthermore," Adrian continued, looking back at Emily, "the contract stipulates that you will receive a monthly stipend for personal expenses, full health coverage, and access to a vehicle. In the event of a divorce, which can be initiated by either party after 1 year, you will receive a lump sum settlement of $200,000, and the lease on your current apartment will be paid for another 2 years to ensure you are not left homeless." Emily stared at him. $200,000? "It is fair compensation for your time and the risk to your reputation," Adrian said calmly. "Also, there is a clause regarding my business." He tapped the table with his index finger. "You will see nothing. You will hear nothing, and you will sign nothing related to the Moretti family investments." He said, "You are completely insulated. If the federal government ever decides to audit me, your name will be nowhere near the books. You are protected from any legal fallout." Emily looked down at the paperwork. It was clinical. It was safe. It was everything Ryan had never offered her: security, respect, and clear boundaries. But there was one question the contract did not answer. "Mr. Vance," Emily said, not looking up, "could you give us a moment?" The lawyer looked at Adrian, who gave a curt nod. Vance closed his briefcase and walked toward the kitchen, leaving them alone in the quiet dining room. Emily looked up. The air between them felt suddenly thin. "Are you dangerous?" she asked. She watched his face closely. If he laughed, or if he gave her a smooth, evasive answer, she would walk out. Adrian did not laugh. He did not look away. He clasped his hands on the table, his demeanor shifting from businessman to something older, harder. "I am a man who exists in a world where the law is often a suggestion. Not a rule," Adrian said slowly. "I handle problems that the police cannot or will not touch. There are people in this city who wish me harm, and there are people who have learned to fear me." Emily felt a chill ripple through her, but she did not flinch. "Do you hurt people?" she asked. "Only those who threaten what is mine," Adrian said. "And I have rules, strict rules. I do not traffic in drugs. I do not touch women or children, and I do not bring violence into my home." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the table between them. "If you marry me, Emily, you come under that protection. Ryan Blake is a bully. He hurts people because he enjoys it. I use force because it is sometimes the only way to maintain order. I am not a good man, perhaps, but I am a disciplined one." His honesty was stark, stripping away the pretense of the polite restaurateur. He was admitting to being a criminal, or something close to it, and yet, looking at him, Emily felt safer than she had in years. Ryan had been a good man on paper, a college graduate, a corporate climber, and he had destroyed her. Adrian was admitting to his darkness, and in doing so, he was giving her the choice to accept it or run. Emily reached for the pen. She thought of the humiliation Ryan had planned. She thought of the way Adrian had looked at her when she told him about the baby, the fierce, protective anger in his eyes. "Where do I sign?" she asked. The City Hall courthouse was a building of gray stone and echoing hallways, smelling of floor wax and bureaucracy. It was devoid of romance, filled with people paying parking tickets and filing permits. Emily stood before the judge, a tired-looking woman in black robes who clearly wanted to get to her lunch break. Beside her, Adrian stood tall and silent, wearing a charcoal suit that made him look like a senator or a titan of industry. It was a civil ceremony, brief and functional. There were no flowers, no music, only the scratching of the court clerk's pen and the low hum of the air conditioning. "Do you, Adrian Moretti, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the judge droned. "I do," Adrian said. His voice was clear, resonating in the small room. "Do you, Emily Carter, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Emily looked at his profile. He was looking straight ahead, his jaw set. This was a deal, a strategy. But as she looked at him, she realized that she was binding her life to his, however temporarily. "I do," she said softly. The rings were exchanged. Adrian had produced a simple but elegant platinum band for her, and she placed a matching plain band on his finger. As he slid the ring onto her finger, his hand engulfed hers. His skin was warm, his grip firm. Just as the metal settled at the base of her finger, Adrian's thumb brushed over her knuckles. It was a small, almost absent-minded caress, but it sent a jolt of heat shooting up her arm. She looked up at him, startled. He turned his head, his dark eyes meeting hers. For a second, the sterile courtroom faded. There was a weight to the moment, a gravity she hadn't expected. This was legal. This was real. She was Mrs. Adrian Moretti. Panic fluttered in her chest, a sudden realization of the magnitude of what she had done. She had just married the mob boss of Brookside. "You may kiss the bride," the judge said, closing her ledger. Emily stiffened, but Adrian moved with practiced grace. He stepped closer, blocking the view of the judge and the clerk. He leaned down, placing a hand on her shoulder, a polite, respectful touch. He kissed her cheek, his lips warm against her skin, lingering for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Let us go," he murmured against her ear. "It is done. To celebrate." Adrian did not take her to a public spectacle. He took her back to Moretti's, but this time he led her through a hidden door in the kitchen that opened into a private lounge. The room was small and intimate, lined with bookshelves and lit only by the soft, golden glow of candles placed on a low table. A bottle of vintage red wine was already breathing in a decanter, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. It was a space designed for secrets. "Sit," Adrian said, gesturing to a velvet sofa. He walked over to the sideboard and poured 2 glasses of wine. Emily sat, her nerves humming beneath her skin. She watched as Adrian unbuttoned his suit jacket and draped it over a chair. Then, with a sigh that seemed to release the tension of the day, he loosened his tie and undid the top button of his shirt. It was such a domestic, human gesture that it caught Emily off guard. The untouchable Adrian Moretti was just a man who was tired after a long day. He handed her a glass and sat on the adjacent armchair, stretching his long legs out. "To new alliances," he said, raising his glass. "To alliances," Emily echoed, taking a sip. The wine was rich and complex, warming her chest. Dinner was served by a silent waiter who vanished as quickly as he appeared, plates of handmade pasta with truffle cream and roasted lamb. As they ate, the silence, which had been awkward at first, began to soften. "Why do you do it?" Emily asked suddenly, setting down her fork. "The restaurant, the other things." "You could have been anything. You are obviously intelligent." Adrian swirled his wine, staring into the dark liquid. "My father was a chaotic man. He ran this neighborhood before me, but he had no discipline. He let his temper rule him. He gambled, he drank. I watched him lose everything, respect, money, and eventually his life, because he could not control himself." He looked up at Emily, his expression guarded but honest. "I grew up in a house that was always screaming. I vowed that when I took over, there would be silence. I built the legitimate businesses to wash the money, yes, but also because I wanted to build something that would last. I crave order. Emily. I control the crime in this city so that it does not spill over into the streets where innocent people live. It is a necessary evil. Emily looked at him with new eyes. He wasn't a monster. He was a dam holding back a flood. I understand chaos, she said quietly. After the miscarriage, my life felt like it was dissolving. Ryan took my reputation, my friends, my confidence. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a hurricane. How did you survive? Adrian asked. I worked, she said. I got a job as an assistant event planner. I focused on napkins and floral arrangements and seating charts. I controlled the tiny details because I could not control the big ones. I rebuilt myself. One centerpiece at a time. Adrian watched her. The firelight danced in her eyes. She looked fragile. Yes, but it was the fragility of tempered glass, stronger than it appeared. You are stronger than you think, Adrian said softly. Most people would have broken completely. You just built a fortress. They stared at each other, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Two people who had constructed walls to keep the world out. Now sitting inside the perimeter together, the waiter arrived with dessert, a dark chocolate tart, as he placed the plates down. Adrian shifted his position, and his knee brushed against Emily's under the small table. She didn't pull away. The contact was electric, a sudden reminder of the physical reality of the man sitting inches from her. Emily laughed at a dry comment Adrian made about the judge's monotone voice, the sound bright and genuine. Adrian froze for a moment, watching her. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile. It transformed her face, taking years off the weariness she carried. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingering there. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with business contracts. Without looking away, Adrian reached across the table. Emily's breath hitched. He extended his hand, his fingers brushing her cheek as he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingertips were rough, calloused, but his touch was incredibly gentle. He let his hand linger there, cupping her jaw for a heartbeat, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. A shiver raced down Emily's spine, not of fear, but of something sharp and yearning. Her heart hammered against her ribs. You should laugh more often, Adrian murmured, his voice low and rough. It suits you. He pulled his hand back slowly, breaking the spell, but the heat of his touch remained on her skin. When they left the restaurant, the city was draped in night. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of the ocean from the harbor. Adrian walked her to his car, a sleek black sedan parked in the alley. He opened the passenger door for her, but before she got in, he paused. The agreement states you will live in my penthouse, he said. For appearances. But we have not moved your things yet. I can go back to my apartment tonight, Emily said, though the thought of her empty, silent studio suddenly felt lonely. Come with me, Adrian said. I want to show you the place. You should know where you will be sleeping. It is safer than your building. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Okay. The drive was short. Adrian's building was a glass needle piercing the skyline of Brookside, a testament to his wealth and power. The penthouse was on the top floor, accessed by a private elevator that required a key card and a fingerprint scan. When the doors slid open, Emily stepped into a world of quiet luxury. The apartment was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the glittering city below. The furniture was modern, Italian leather and chrome, stark and masculine. It smelled faintly of him, expensive cologne, cedar, and something clean and cool like snow. It is beautiful, she whispered, but it is very quiet. I like quiet, Adrian said, closing the door behind them. He gave her a brief tour. The kitchen was spotless, looking like it had never been used. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment. The master bedroom was a sanctuary of dark blues and grays, with a bed that looked vast and imposing. Emily walked toward the sliding glass doors in the living room that led to the terrace. She stepped out into the night air. The wind whipped at her hair, and the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds. She felt a presence behind her. Adrian stepped out onto the balcony, standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He did not touch her at first. He just stood there, a solid wall at her back, shielding her from the wind. "Are you regretting it?" he asked, his voice near her ear. "No," Emily said, surprised to find that she meant it. "I am terrified, but I do not regret it." Adrian moved then. He placed his hand gently on the small of her back. The touch was possessive, guiding. "Turn around," he said softly. Emily turned. He was so close. The city lights reflected in his dark eyes, making them burn with a strange intensity. He reached up, his hand sliding from her waist to her neck, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin under her chin. He tilted her face up. The distance between them vanished. The wind, the city, the contract, it all faded into the background. Adrian lowered his head. He gave her plenty of time to pull away, but she didn't. She didn't want to. His lips brushed hers. A question. Warm, firm. Emily gasped softly, her hands instinctively coming up to grip the lapels of his shirt. At her response, Adrian groaned low in his throat, and the kiss deepened. It wasn't tentative anymore. His mouth moved over hers with a hunger that stunned her. It was a claiming. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. Emily melted into him, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. She felt the solid thud of his heart against her chest, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. He tasted of wine and danger, and for the first time in 6 years, she didn't feel broken. She felt consumed. Adrian pulled back, just an inch, both of them breathing hard. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, his hand still cradling the back of her head. "We are in trouble. Mrs. Moretti," he whispered, his voice rough and unsteady. Emily opened her eyes, looking at the man who had just promised to protect her, and realized that the biggest danger to her heart might not be the man who hated her, but the one who was holding her now. This is no longer an act, she thought, her pulse racing. It never was. Moving into the penthouse felt less like a relocation and more like stepping onto a different planet. The air at the top of the skyline was thinner, cleaner, and filled with a silence that Emily was not used to. Her old apartment had vibrated with the sounds of neighbors, traffic, and the settling of old pipes. Here, the only sound was the low, rhythmic hum of the city far below, filtered through triple-paned glass. Adrian had given her the master guest suite, a room larger than her entire previous home, filled with cream-colored linens and fresh flowers that appeared daily. They had established ground rules on the first night, sitting at the long marble dining table like business partners merging two corporations. No unexpected guests, no discussing the arrangement outside these walls, and, most importantly, a respect for personal space. Yet, as the days blurred toward the weekend of the wedding, the boundaries of that space began to fray. It happened in small, uncalculated moments. They would pass each other in the hallway, and the air would seem to compress, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Emily's arms stand up. They would reach for the same water pitcher during dinner, their fingers brushing, and the contact would linger a second too long, heavy with unspoken questions. Adrian was a man of discipline, but Emily caught him watching her when he thought she was not looking, his dark eyes tracking her movement across the room with a brooding intensity that made her breath hitch. The tension came to a head on a Thursday morning, 3 days before the wedding. Emily woke early, unable to sleep as the anxiety of the impending confrontation with Ryan gnawed at her. She wandered out to the kitchen, barefoot and wearing an oversized silk robe she had bought to feel more armored in this luxury. She expected the house to be empty, as Adrian usually left for the gym before sunrise. Instead, she found him standing at the espresso machine. He was not the polished, armor-clad figure she was used to seeing. He was wearing dark pajama bottoms and a white dress shirt that was unbuttoned halfway down his chest. The sleeves rolled up haphazardly. His hair, usually styled with military precision, was tousled, a lock falling over his forehead. He looked human. He looked devastating. "Good morning," Adrian murmured, his voice rough with sleep as he turned to face her. "Morning," Emily said, tightening the belt of her robe. "I did not think you were up. I could not sleep," he admitted, turning back to the machine as it hissed and sputtered steam. "Coffee? Please." She walked around the island, intending to grab a mug from the cabinet above the counter where he stood. It was a wide kitchen, but as she approached, the space seemed to shrink. Adrian did not move out of the way. He stayed rooted to the spot, watching her approach with hooded eyes. Emily reached up, her body stretching as she tried to grasp the ceramic handle on the top shelf. The movement caused her robe to slip slightly off her shoulder. She felt the heat of Adrian's body behind her, radiating through the thin silk. "You need a step stool," Adrian noted, his voice low, vibrating near her ear. "I can reach it," she insisted, standing on her tiptoes. Her fingers brushed the mug, but before she could grip it, Adrian's hands settled on her waist. His touch was firm, warm, and possessive. He did not push her away. He held her there, trapping her lightly between his solid frame and the cool marble of the counter. Emily froze, her arm still raised. She lowered it slowly, turning her head to look at him over her shoulder. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises, the shadow of stubble along his jawline. "You are making this difficult," Adrian whispered. "Getting a mug?" she breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Existing in my kitchen," he corrected. He turned her around gently so she was facing him. The distance between them was non-existent now. His palms slid up her sides, resting on her rib cage, his thumbs tracing the curve of her waist through the silk. The casual intimacy of the gesture made her knees weak. "I thought we had rules," Emily whispered, though she made no move to step back. "We do," Adrian said, his gaze dropping to her lips. "But you are going to drive me insane if you keep looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you are waiting for me to do something about it." The air in the kitchen seemed to snap. Whatever restraint Adrian had been holding on to evaporated. He leaned down, and this time there was no hesitation, no testing of the waters. He kissed her with a hunger that stole the breath from her lungs. It was messy and urgent, a collision of suppressed desire and raw need. Emily gasped against his mouth, her hands flying up to clutch at his chest. She could feel the hard, rapid thud of his heart beneath her palms, mirroring her own. Adrian groaned low in his throat, a sound of surrender. He gripped her waist tighter, lifting her effortlessly until she was sitting on the edge of the counter. Emily wrapped her legs around him, pulling him closer, needing to eliminate every inch of space between them. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back as the kiss deepened, becoming a fierce exploration. For a moment, Emily forgot everything. She forgot Ryan, the wedding, the contract, the danger. There was only this, the smell of coffee and cedar, the rough friction of his stubble against her skin, and the overwhelming, solid heat of him. A sharp, shrill beep cut through the haze, the espresso machine. They broke apart as if physically struck. Adrian pulled back, his chest heaving, his eyes blown wide and dark with desire. Emily sat on the counter, her lips swollen, her robe disheveled, breathing hard. The machine beeped again, insistent and mundane. Adrian closed his eyes for a second, inhaling deeply, fighting for control. He rested his forehead against hers, his hands still gripping her thighs. "We have to stop," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel. Emily nodded, unable to find her voice. She knew he was right. If they crossed this line now, in the heat of the moment, the blurred lines of their arrangement would vanish completely. They would be entering territory that required truths they were not ready to speak. "Right," she whispered, sliding off the counter. "The coffee." Adrian stepped back, giving her space, though his gaze lingered on her as if he wanted nothing more than to pull her back. "I will get dressed," he said, turning away to tend to the machine, his movements stiff and mechanical. Emily grabbed her mug and retreated to the living room, her skin still burning from his touch, the taste of him lingering on her lips. Across the city, in a sun-drenched bridal suite that smelled of lilies and entitlement, Ryan Blake was finalizing the details of his triumph. He sat on a velvet chaise lounge, scrolling through his phone, while Charlotte Hale stood before a mirror, fussing over the train of her gown. Charlotte was beautiful in a conventional, polished way, but her eyes lacked depth. She was marrying Ryan because it made sense for their portfolios, and because he was handsome enough to look good in photos. "Did you send the final playlist to the DJ?" Charlotte asked, examining a loose thread. "Done," Ryan said, not looking up. "And I met with the videographer this morning. The tribute segment is going to be perfect." Charlotte frowned slightly. "Are you sure about this? Ryan? Bringing up your ex during the reception? It seems intense." Ryan stood up, walking over to kiss her forehead. He smiled, the expression practiced in smooth, "It is necessary." "Char, people still talk. They whisper that I was the bad guy, that I abandoned her. I need to show them the truth. This video, it is about closure. It shows how unstable she was. It shows that I tried to help her, but she was beyond saving. Once everyone sees it, the rumors stop, and then we can start our life with a clean slate." He did not mention that the video was a masterpiece of manipulation. He had hired an editor to splice together out-of-context voicemails from 6 years ago, sobbing messages Emily had left him after the miscarriage, and overlay them with ominous music and footage of her looking disheveled after a rainstorm. It was designed to make her look deranged, and the best part, she would be there to see it. Ryan checked his messages. He had instructed the seating coordinator to place Emily at a table near the back, but with a direct line of sight to the main screen. He wanted to see her face when the room turned against her. "She thinks she can just show up," he thought, a cruel smirk touching his lips. "I will make her wish she had never been born." In the secure office above Moretti's, the mood was far less celebratory. Adrian sat behind his desk, fully dressed now in a charcoal suit, his demeanor icy and controlled. Marco stood by the window, looking grim. "He's bragging about it," Marco said. "My contact in the catering staff heard him. Ryan is telling people he has dirt on the ex-girlfriend, something about a baby. He's calling it his reputation insurance." Adrian's hand clenched into a fist on the desk. A baby. The miscarriage. Ryan was going to weaponize the loss of a child to save his own face. It was a level of depravity that Adrian had rarely encountered, even in his line of work. "There is more," Marco added hesitantly. "Go on. We have a confirm on the guest list. A man named Victor Russo is attending. He's a mid-level associate for the DeLuca family." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Why is a DeLuca associate at a Blake wedding?" "Ryan owes money," Marco explained. "Gambling debts. He's been borrowing from loan sharks connected to DeLuca to fund this wedding and his lifestyle. Russo is likely there to collect, or to make a scene if Ryan does not pay up." Adrian sat back, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Ryan was not just a cruel boy, he was a desperate one. He was drowning in debt, marrying a rich girl to save himself, and using Emily as a distraction to make himself look like a victim. "If the DeLucas are there, they might try to use the event to get to me," Adrian murmured. "Or they might wait until the reception turns chaotic to make a move." He looked at Marco. "Double the security detail for the wedding. I want men in the kitchen, men in the parking lot, and men in the AV booth, and get me the financial records on Ryan's debts. Everything. If he wants to play games with reputations, I will show him how it is really done." That evening, the penthouse was quiet. Emily sat on the sofa, a book open on her lap, but she hadn't turned a page in an hour. When Adrian walked in, the energy in the room shifted instantly. He did not go to the kitchen or his study. He walked straight to the living room. Loosening his tie, he looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Emily," he said, his voice serious, "we need to talk." Emily closed the book, her stomach dropping. "What is it? Is the deal off?" "No," Adrian said, sitting on the coffee table in front of her so they were at eye level. "But I need to know exactly what Ryan has." Emily blinked. "I told you. The rumors. The lies. My sources say he has something specific," Adrian said gently. "He is bragging about dirt. He's planning to use it in his speech." Emily went pale. She looked away, her hands trembling in her lap. She knew what it was. She had prayed he wouldn't sink that low, but deep down, she knew he would. He has voicemails, she whispered. Adrian waited, his silence a prompt. From after, she said, her voice cracking. After I lost the baby, I was not okay. Adrian, I was 21, I was bleeding, and I was alone in a dorm room, and the hormones were crashing. I called him a dozen times. I was crying, I was screaming. I begged him to just answer the phone. I told him I felt like I was dying. Tears spilled over her lashes, hot and fast. He recorded them? Adrian asked, his voice deadly quiet. He kept them. Emily sobbed. He used to play them for his frat brothers to show them how crazy I was. If he plays those for the wedding guests. She buried her face in her hands. It will sound like I am insane. No one will know I was grieving a child. They will just hear a woman screaming at a man who does not want her. The room was silent for a long moment. Emily waited for Adrian to pull away. It was ugly. It was messy. It was the kind of baggage that sent men running. Instead, she felt strong arms wrap around her. Adrian pulled her off the sofa and into his lap, holding her against his chest as if she were made of glass. He did not speak immediately. He just held her, one hand pressing her head to his shoulder, the other rubbing slow, soothing circles on her back. He is a dead man, Adrian whispered into her hair. The words were not a threat. They were a statement of fact. Emily clung to his shirt, soaking the expensive fabric with her tears. I am so sorry, she gasped. I am so sorry I dragged you into this. You did not drag me anywhere, Adrian said firmly, pulling back to look at her. Her eyes were swollen, her face blotchy, but he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing he owned. He will never get near you again, Adrian vowed, his jaw tight with contained fury. He thinks he can use your pain to entertain his guests. He has no idea what he has just started. Emily looked up at him, seeing the fierce protection in his gaze. It was not pity. It was a warrior's promise. Thank you, she whispered. Adrian looked at her tear-stained face, and the anger in his eyes softened into something else, something darker, warmer. He leaned in and kissed her. It started as a gesture of comfort, gentle and reassuring, but the moment their lips touched, the dynamic shifted. The fear of the day, the anger at Ryan, the proximity, it all combusted. Adrian's hand slid from her back to the nape of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. He kissed her with a fierce, protective desire, as if he could scrub away the memory of Ryan's cruelty with the sheer force of his own regard. Emily opened to him, kissing him back with a desperate need to feel alive, to feel claimed. He stood up, lifting her with him, her legs wrapping around his waist as they had in the kitchen. He carried her toward the hallway, his mouth never leaving hers, walking blindly toward the bedroom. They reached the doorway of the master suite. Adrian stopped. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. Emily could feel the tension in his muscles, the way his body demanded completion. Not like this, Adrian murmured, his voice strained. Emily blinked, her mind hazy. What? Not because you are sad, Adrian said, setting her feet gently on the floor but keeping his hands on her hips, and not because you are afraid. When I take you to bed, Emily, it will be because you want me, not because you need a distraction from him. Emily looked at him, stunned by his restraint. He wanted her. That was obvious from the way he looked at her, but he refused to take advantage of her vulnerability. I do want you, she whispered. I know, Adrian said, brushing a thumb over her swollen lip, but we have a wedding to get through. I want no ghosts in our bed. We wait. After the wedding, all bets are off. The promise hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. 2 nights later, they made their public debut. It was a charity benefit for the city's Arts Council, a safe, high society event where Adrian knew half the board. Emily wore a dress Adrian had selected, a sleek emerald green gown that hugged her curves and left her back exposed. She wore diamonds at her throat and the platinum band on her finger. When they walked into the ballroom, the conversation faltered for a noticeable second. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Is that Adrian Moretti? Who is she? I heard he got married. To her? Who is she? Emily felt the weight of the stairs physically. She instinctively moved closer to Adrian. He did not falter. He walked with his head high, radiating an aura of untouchable power. He kept his arm firmly around her waist, his thumb tracing small, soothing circles on the bare skin of her hip. It was a grounding touch, a constant reminder that she was anchored. This is my wife, Emily. Adrian introduced her to the mayor, his voice smooth and filled with pride. Emily smiled, shook hands, and played the part. But she realized as the night went on that she wasn't acting. She felt safe, for the first time in years. She walked through a room of judgmental people and felt completely shielded. Ryan Blake saw the photos the next morning. He was sitting in his bachelor pad, nursing a hangover, when the notification popped up on his feed. A society page had posted a photo from the gala. The elusive Adrian Moretti steps out with his new wife, Emily Moretti. Ryan stared at the screen. He zoomed in on Emily's face. She looked stunning. She looked expensive. And she looked happy. He threw his phone across the room. It smashed against the wall, cracking the screen. "It is a stunt," he yelled to the empty room. "She is a broke event planner. She cannot be married to Moretti." He paced the room, his face red with rage. This ruined everything. If she was married to a powerful man, his narrative of the obsessed, pathetic ex-girlfriend would look ridiculous. He would look like a liar. He retrieved his cracked phone and dialed a number. "It is Ryan," he barked when the line connected. "I have a story for you. Exclusive. The Moretti marriage is a sham. The girl is a gold digger I used to date. I have proof she is unstable." He listened for a moment. "Yes, bring a photographer to the wedding." He said, his eyes manic. "I am going to expose her. I am going to blow this whole charade wide open at the Moretti penthouse." Adrian was on a call with Marco. The journalist is a hack named Sterling. Marco said he writes gossip for the tabloids. Ryan just offered him an exclusive to expose Emily at the wedding. Adrian stood by the window, looking out at the gray morning sky. "Let him come," Adrian said coldly. "Boss," Marco asked. "Let the journalist come," Adrian repeated. "And let the DeLuca man come. We are going to change the play." He turned from the window, his face set in a grim smile. "Ryan wants to talk about secrets? Fine. We will talk about secrets. Get the file on Ryan's embezzlement from his father's company, and get the audio recordings of him gambling with the DeLuca loan sharks. We are going to play them?" Marco asked. "We are going to switch the feed," Adrian said. "When Ryan stands up to play his little movie about Emily, the world is going to see exactly who Ryan Blake really is." He hung up the phone. The trap was set. Ryan was walking into his own funeral, and he was too arrogant to even see the shovel. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate, heavy with the promise of rain. In the master suite of the penthouse, the atmosphere was quiet, a calm before the inevitable storm. Emily stood before the full-length mirror, smoothing the fabric of her gown. It was a deep, midnight navy, cut from heavy silk that draped over her curves like water. It was modest yet striking, with a high neckline and a back that dipped low. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, fell in soft, glossy waves around her shoulders. On her left hand, the platinum band and the solitaire diamond Adrian had given her caught the gray light from the window, flashing with a brilliance that felt almost aggressive. She stared at her reflection. The woman looking back was not the Emily Carter who bought groceries with coupons and apologized to rude clients. This woman stood taller. Her chin was lifted. Her eyes held a spark of defiance that had been absent for years. "Do I deserve this?" she wondered silently. After years of shame, of feeling like a mistake. Was she allowed to wear armor this expensive? Was she allowed to feel this powerful? A movement in the mirror caught her eye. Adrian entered the room from the dressing area. He was dressed in a black tuxedo, the tailoring so precise it made him look lethal. He was adjusting his cufflinks, his movements sharp and deliberate. He stopped when he saw her. His hand stilled on his cuffs, his dark eyes swept over her, taking in the gown, the hair, the set of her shoulders. The appreciation in his gaze was undisguised, hot and heavy, but beneath it lay something steadier, a look of profound respect. He walked over to her, the sound of his shoes muffled by the thick carpet. He stepped behind her, looking at her reflection in the glass. He placed his hands on her waist, his thumbs pressing gently into the silk. "You look incredible," he said. His voice low and rumbled near her ear. "I feel like I am wearing a costume," Emily admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Like I am playing a character who is braver than I am." "You are not playing a character," Adrian said firmly. He leaned in closer, his breath warm on her neck. "You survived hell. Emily, today. You are just walking back into it to put out the fire." He paused, his eyes locking with hers in the mirror. "Remember," he whispered, "regardless of what happens in that room, no one gets to define you but you. Not Ryan, not his mother, not the guests. Just you." Emily took a shaky breath. She turned in his arms to face him. The nerves were still there, buzzing under her skin like bees, but the determination was stronger. She reached up, placing her hands on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she said softly. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. It wasn't a show for an audience. It was a seal on their pact, a transfer of strength. His arms tightened around her for a brief second, grounding her, before he pulled back. "Let us go," Adrian said, offering his arm. "It is time." The glass pavilion was a structure of breathtaking vanity, 3 walls of floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the churning ocean, designed to make the occupants feel as though they were floating above the world, inside. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the murmur of 200 guests. When the heavy glass doors opened and Adrian Moretti walked in with Emily on his arm, the murmur died instantly. Silence rippled through the room, spreading outward from the entrance like a shockwave. Heads turned, drinks paused halfway to mouths. The elite of Brookside knew Adrian Moretti by reputation. Dangerous, wealthy, elusive. They did not know he had a wife, and they certainly did not expect that wife to be the girl Ryan Blake had spent years dragging through the mud. Emily kept her head high, her hand resting lightly on Adrian's forearm. She could feel the eyes on her. She saw Jessica, her old college friend, jaw dropping open. She saw Ryan's mother, a woman who had once looked at Emily like she was a stain on the carpet, now staring with a mixture of confusion and wariness. And then she saw Ryan. He was standing near the front of the room, laughing with a group of groomsmen. When he saw the commotion, he turned. His smile froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale and sickly looking. He stared at Emily, then at Adrian, his eyes darting back and forth as if trying to calculate an equation that made no sense. For a moment, he looked like he might run. Then, the mask of the charming groom slammed back into place. He flushed, a red stain creeping up his neck, and walked toward them with a forced, brittle smile. "Emily," Ryan exclaimed, his voice a little too loud, a little too high. "You made it. And you brought a guest." "My husband," Emily said. Her voice was calm, surprising even herself. "Ryan, this is Adrian Moretti." Ryan stopped dead. Husband Adrian extended a hand. Ryan looked at it, then took it. Adrian's grip was firm, bordering on crushing. Ryan winced slightly but held the smile. "I did not know you were married," Ryan stammered, looking between them. "That is sudden." "We prefer privacy," Adrian said smoothly, "but Emily insisted we come to wish you well. It is a big day, after all." The tension was palpable. Guests were leaning in, straining to hear. Charlotte, the bride, drifted over, looking beautiful but anxious. She sensed the undercurrent of hostility, though she didn't understand the source. "Ryan, who is this?" Charlotte asked, touching Ryan's arm. "This is Emily," Ryan said, his voice tight. "An old friend. And her husband." Charlotte smiled warmly at Emily, oblivious to the history. "Oh, it is so lovely to meet you. Thank you for coming." Ryan looked at Emily, his eyes narrowing. He leaned in, lowering his voice so Charlotte wouldn't hear. "I am surprised you showed up," he muttered. "I thought you would be too ashamed." Adrian stepped forward. He did not shove Ryan, he simply occupied the space between Ryan and Emily, a physical barrier that said stop. He placed his hand on the small of Emily's back, a gesture that was possessive and final. "Why would she be ashamed?" Adrian asked, his voice polite but his eyes cold as ice. "She has nothing to hide. Do you?" Ryan blinked. Unsettled by Adrian's tone, he laughed nervously. "We should catch up properly later. Just the two of us. To clear the air." "I do not think so," Adrian said. His smile did not reach his eyes. "My wife does not do solo meetings. Enjoy your reception." Ryan, he steered Emily away, leaving Ryan standing there, fuming and impotent. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. Emily sat at their table, picking at her salad, feeling the weight of the stares. She knew what was coming. The speeches were scheduled for after the main course. Ryan was moving around the room, drinking heavily. He looked manic. He was whispering to the AV staff, checking the projector screen. He kept glancing at Emily with a smug, vindictive grin. Adrian ate calmly, but his body was coiled with tension. Under the table, his hand found hers, resting on her knee. His thumb rubbed back and forth. A silent signal. Wait, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center of the room. Ryan stood up, holding a microphone. He swayed slightly. "Thank you all for coming," Ryan announced. His voice boomed through the speakers. "Before we cut the cake, I wanted to say a few words about love and about the past." The room went quiet. "We all have a past," Ryan said, walking slowly toward the screen. "Some of us have baggage. Some of us have mistakes that refuse to go away." He looked directly at Emily. She held his gaze, refusing to look down. "I had an ex once," Ryan continued, his tone mocking. "She was intense. She could not let go. She made up stories. She tried to trap me. It was a hard time, but I believe in transparency. I believe in showing the truth so we can all move on. So I prepared a little video, a tribute to the bullets we dodge." There was an uncomfortable ripple of laughter from his groomsmen, but the rest of the room was silent. People shifted in their seats. It was cruel. It was tacky. Ryan signaled the AV booth. "Hit it." The huge screen behind the head table flickered to life. Emily held her breath. She expected to see her own face, distorted and tear-stained. She expected to hear her voice screaming. Instead, the screen showed a grainy video of a poker table. Ryan's voice filled the room. But it wasn't a speech. It was a recording. "My old man does not know I took the money," the voice of Ryan Blake said clearly from the speakers. "He thinks it is just a bookkeeping error. I siphoned off 200 grand last month. Easy," the room gasped. On the screen, Ryan was laughing, holding a drink. "And the best part? I am marrying the Hale girl. Her dad is loaded. Once the ring is on, her trust fund covers my debt to you guys. It is a slam dunk." Ryan froze on stage. He stared at the screen, his mouth open. The video cut to another clip. Ryan was sitting in a bar with his friends. "Emily? Please, that girl was a mess," Ryan sneered on the video. "I told her to get rid of the kid. When she lost it, I just told everyone she was crazy. It is so easy to ruin a woman's reputation. You just call her hysterical, and everyone believes you." A collective inhale sucked the air out of the room. Charlotte Hale stood up, her hand over her mouth, tears instantly springing to her eyes. Ryan's mother looked like she was going to faint. Ryan dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a screech of feedback. "Turn it off," Ryan screamed, waving his arms at the booth. "Turn it off." But the video continued. It showed Ryan bragging about insider trading. It showed him mocking his friends. It laid his soul bare, revealing the rot beneath the charm. Adrian stood up. He did not shout. He did not need to. In the sudden silence of the room, his movement was a thunderclap. He still held Emily's hand. "Some men," Adrian said, his voice calm, measured, and carrying to every corner of the room, "mistake cruelty for power. They think that by crushing the vulnerable, they become strong." He looked at Ryan, who was shaking, his face a mask of terror and rage. "But real power," Adrian continued, "does not need to destroy a woman to feel big. Real power protects." Ryan looked around the room. He saw the disgust on the faces of his guests. He saw his fiancé's father standing up, face purple with rage. He saw his world crumbling. And he snapped. "You!" Ryan shrieked, pointing at Emily. "You did this! You crazy bitch! You set me up!" He lunged off the stage, storming toward their table. "You ruined everything!" Ryan yelled, his eyes wild. "You are nothing! You are just a—" Adrian stepped in front of Emily. He did not raise his fists. He simply stepped into Ryan's path. He was bigger, broader, and infinitely more dangerous. His eyes were dead cold. "If you take one more step toward my wife," Adrian said softly, only for Ryan to hear. "It will be the last step you ever take on two functioning legs." Ryan stopped. The threat was not a bluster. It was a promise. Emily stepped out from behind Adrian. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was clear. She looked at the room. She looked at the people who had whispered about her for 6 years. "I did not ruin you." "Ryan," Emily said. Her voice rang out, steady and true. "You did. I lost a child. I grieved alone. And you used that pain to make yourself feel important. I am not the crazy one. I never was." Charlotte Hale walked up to Ryan. She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. And then she slapped him. The sound cracked through the room like a pistol shot. "It is over," she sobbed. "Get out!" The doors to the pavilion burst open. Police officers, accompanied by federal agents in suits, swarmed into the room. "Ryan Blake?" an agent barked. Ryan looked around, panic setting in. "What? No, this is a mistake. We have a warrant for your arrest," the agent said, moving in with handcuffs, fraud, embezzlement, insider trading. "And we have some questions about your association with known organized crime figures regarding illegal gambling debts." Ryan struggled as they grabbed him. "No, you cannot do this. Do you know who my father is?" His father was sitting at the head table, head in his hands, refusing to look up. As they dragged Ryan past the table, he looked at Emily one last time. His eyes were filled with hate, but also with fear. He looked at Adrian, and he saw the man who had outplayed him without ever raising his voice. The guests parted like the Red Sea as the police hauled the groom out of his own wedding. Cameras flashed, guests taking photos, recording the downfall. The humiliation Ryan had planned for Emily had come for him, swift and total. The room was left in a stunned silence. The video screen had gone black. Adrian turned to Emily. He ignored the chaos around them. He ignored the shocked stares of the elite. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you all right?" he asked. Emily looked at the door where Ryan had vanished. She felt lightheaded. The weight she had been carrying for 6 years, the shame, the fear, the anger, was gone. It had simply evaporated. "I am free," she whispered. Adrian smiled. It was a small, rare thing, but it reached his eyes. "Yes," he said, "you are." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close into his side. "Come," he said, "let us go home." They walked out of the glass pavilion together, leaving the wreckage of Ryan's life behind them, stepping out into the cool, clean air of the night. Emily Moretti walked with her head high, not because she was arrogant, but because she finally knew who she was. And the man beside her, the dangerous, quiet man who had burned down the world for her, held her hand tight. The arrest of Ryan Blake was not dignified. It was a chaotic, noisy affair that shattered the last remnants of the elegant atmosphere the glass pavilion was famous for. The strobe light effect of camera flashes from the very media Ryan had invited to document his triumph now illuminated his absolute downfall. "Get your hands off me," Ryan shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria as 2 federal agents hauled him toward the exit. "Do you have any idea who I am? This is a mistake. You are making a huge mistake." The journalist Ryan had bribed, a man named Sterling with a predatory grin, was snapping photos rapidly, capturing the groom's disheveled hair, the handcuffs glinting under the venue lights, and the look of sheer, unadulterated terror in his eyes. It was the scoop of the year, just not the one Ryan had intended to sell. Emily stood near the head table, her hand still enveloped in Adrian's firm grip. She watched Ryan struggle, kicking at the door frame as he was shoved outside into the waiting night, It was a scene of such raw, poetic justice that it felt surreal. The man who had spent 6 years trying to make her feel small was now being dragged out like a common criminal, screaming at the sky while the world watched. The room behind them was a buzz of shocked whispers. Charlotte Hale sat on a chair, surrounded by her bridesmaids, weeping softly into a napkin. Her father, Thomas Hale, a formidable man in the shipping industry, walked slowly toward Adrian. "Mister." Hale looked tired. He looked at the empty doorway where his almost son-in-law had vanished, and then he looked at Adrian. "Mr. Moretti," Thomas Hale said, his voice grave and low. "Mr. Hale," Adrian replied, his tone respectful but guarded. Thomas let out a long, heavy sigh. "I did not know. The gambling, the embezzlement, he looked me in the eye yesterday and told me the audit was clean. He lied to everyone," Adrian said simply. Thomas nodded slowly. Then he looked at Emily. There was no judgment in his eyes now, only a weary apology. "I am sorry for what he put you through tonight, Miss Moretti, and I suppose I should thank your husband. It was a brutal way to learn the truth. But better now than after the papers were signed. You saved my daughter from a disaster. We did what was necessary," Adrian said. Thomas nodded again, then turned to comfort his weeping daughter. The reception was effectively over. The music had stopped. The cake sat uncut in the corner, a tiered monument to a celebration that would never happen. Guests began to drift toward the exits, eager to escape the awkwardness. As they passed Emily and Adrian, the dynamic had shifted entirely. People who had sneered at her an hour ago now looked at her with wide, fearful eyes. "I always knew Ryan was a bit intense," one woman murmured as she hurried past, offering Emily a tight, nervous smile. "So glad you are okay. Emily, I never believed those rumors." Anyway, another man lied smoothly, nodding at Adrian. "Good to see you. Moretti." Emily nodded mechanically, offering no verbal response. She felt dizzy. The rush of adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving her feeling hollowed out. Her knees felt weak, and the noise of the room seemed to be coming from underwater. It was over. The monster under her bed had been exposed as nothing more than a desperate, cruel boy. But the victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt exhausting. Adrian, attuned to every shift in her body language, tightened his arm around her waist. "Come," he murmured near her ear. "Let us get some air." He guided her away from the staring crowds, leading her through a side door that opened onto a private stone terrace overlooking the harbor. The silence outside was a physical relief. The night air was cool and smelled of salt and rain. Below them, the ocean churned against the rocks, dark and rhythmic. Emily walked to the stone railing and leaned against it, gripping the cold, rough surface to steady her trembling hands. She took a deep breath, trying to fill her lungs, but the air felt thin. Adrian stepped up behind her. He did not touch her immediately. He simply took off his tuxedo jacket, the heavy fabric still holding his body heat, and draped it over her shoulders. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. Emily pulled the lapels of his jacket tighter around herself. Inhaling the scent of cedar and sandalwood, she looked out at the dark water. "No," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "He needed to be stopped. He was going to hurt Charlotte. He was going to keep hurting people." "But," Adrian prompted. "But I feel empty," Emily admitted. She turned around to face him, leaning her back against the railing. "For 6 years, my fear of him was the only thing that felt real. I built my whole life around avoiding him, around proving him wrong. Now he is gone, and I do not know who I am without that fight. You are the woman who stood up to him," Adrian said. "You are the woman who reclaimed her name. But what name is that?" Emily asked, searching his face. The question hung between them, heavy and loaded. "We had a deal." "Adrian," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A strategy. You needed a wife for your investors. I needed a shield against Ryan. The wedding is over. Ryan is in jail. The contract, it served its purpose." Adrian went very still. The wind ruffled his dark hair. but his eyes were locked on hers, intense and unreadable. "Is that what you think this is?" Adrian asked. "Just a contract?" "I do not know what it is," Emily cried, her voice cracking. "That is the problem. I am terrified. Adrian—" She took a step toward him, then stopped, hugging herself. "I am terrified because this started as a lie, but it stopped feeling like 1 week ago." She confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I am terrified because when you touch me, I forget that I am supposed to be guarding myself, and most of all, I am terrified of giving my heart to another powerful man who has the ability to destroy me. Ryan broke me because I was weak. You could break me because I care about you, and I do not think I can survive being broken again." Adrian closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He did not grab her. He reached up and cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. His hand was warm, his touch incredibly gentle for a man capable of such violence. "Emily," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Look at me." She lifted her eyes to his. "Ryan broke you because he was a boy playing at being a man," Adrian said fiercely. "He used your pain to make himself feel tall. I have no interest in making you small. Emily, I want you to take up space. I want you to be everything you were afraid to be." He stroked his thumb along her jawline, his gaze dropping to her lips before returning to her eyes. "You asked if the deal is over," he said. "For me. The deal ended the moment I found you in my kitchen making coffee. It ended the moment I saw you laugh at dinner. I do not want a business partner, Emily. I want the woman who challenges me. I want the woman who makes me want a different kind of life." Emily's breath hitched. "A different life? I grew up believing that silence was the only safety," Adrian admitted, a rare vulnerability entering his tone. "I thought a wife was just another asset to manage. But you make me want mornings. You make me want to come home to something other than an empty penthouse and a bottle of scotch. But your world," Emily whispered, her hand coming up to cover his where it rested on her cheek, "the danger, the DeLuca family, the violence. Can you truly separate that from the home we might build? I cannot live waiting for a phone call that says you are dead. I cannot raise a family in the shadow of a gun." Adrian did not offer her an easy lie. He looked at her with a seriousness that anchored her. "I am already doing it," he said. "I started restructuring the operations 3 weeks ago. We are moving 80% of the capital into legitimate real estate and logistics. I am cutting ties with the high-risk street operations. It takes time to turn a ship this size, but I am turning it." He stepped closer, his body brushing against hers. "I want a future where you are safe," he vowed. "I want a future where our children, if we are blessed enough to have them, never have to see what I saw growing up. I am changing the world for you, Emily. Because a world without you in it is not one I am interested in ruling." Emily felt the wall she had built around her heart crumble. It didn't crash down, it simply dissolved, washed away by the steady, relentless tide of his honesty. He wasn't promising perfection. He was promising effort. He was promising himself. She let out a shaky breath, a sound that was half sob, half laughter. "You are restructuring your crime empire for me?" she asked, a small smile touching her lips. "I would burn it all down for you," Adrian said, dead serious, overwhelmed by relief and a longing that had been building for weeks. Emily reached up and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Then take me home," she whispered. Adrian didn't need to be told twice. He groaned low in his throat, a sound of pure need, and crushed her to him. His hand slid around her, one arm banding around her waist to pull her flush against him, the other tangling in the hair at the base of her neck. He kissed her with a raw hunger that shattered the last of her reserve. It wasn't the polite kiss of the courthouse or the restrained kiss of the penthouse hallway. This was a claiming. His mouth moved over hers with a desperate intensity, devouring her sigh. Emily kissed him back just as fiercely, her fingers curling into the crisp white shirt beneath his tuxedo jacket, anchoring herself to the solid reality of him. They stood on the windy terrace, locked together, the sound of the ocean drowned out by the pounding of their own hearts. When Adrian finally pulled back, they were both breathless, their foreheads resting together. "Let us go," he rasped. The drive back to the penthouse was silent, but the air in the car was thick with anticipation. Adrian drove with one hand on the wheel, his other hand holding hers tightly on the center console, their fingers interlaced. When they arrived at the building, they didn't speak. The elevator ride up to the penthouse felt agonizingly slow. Emily watched the numbers climb, her heart racing. The doors slid open. The penthouse was cool and dim, the city lights casting long shadows across the floor. Adrian locked the door behind them. The click of the lock echoed in the silence. He turned to her. He did not turn on the lights. The ambient glow from the city outside was enough. He reached out and slowly slid the heavy tuxedo jacket from her shoulders. It fell to the floor with a soft thud. He didn't look at it. He only looked at her. "No more pretense," Adrian murmured, stepping close. "No more cameras. No more contracts." Emily shivered, but not from cold. She reached out, her hands trembling slightly as she began to undo the buttons of his shirt. "Just us," she whispered. Adrian caught her hands, bringing her knuckles to his lips. He kissed them, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough. "Once we cross this line, Emily, there is no going back. I am not letting you go. I do not want to go back," Emily said, meeting his gaze with absolute certainty. "I want this. I want you." Adrian exhaled shakily, as if a tension he had carried for years finally loosened. He leaned down, kissing the sensitive spot below her ear, sending a jolt of electricity through her. His hands moved over her back, tracing the curve of her spine through the silk of her dress. "You are beautiful," he whispered against her skin. He kissed her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth, treating her with a reverence that made her knees weak. Then he returned to her lips, slow and deep, tasting her sigh. Emily smoothed her palms over his broad shoulders, feeling the hard muscle beneath, marveling at the strength he held in check for her. They moved together toward the bedroom, a slow dance of touch and sensation. There was no rush. They had all the time in the world. At the doorway to the master bedroom, Adrian paused. He framed her face in his hands, looking down at her with a tenderness that stopped her heart. "I love you," he said. The words were quiet, simple, and absolute. Emily smiled, tears pricking her eyes again, but they were happy tears this time. "I love you too," she whispered. Adrian lifted her into his arms, carrying her over the threshold. He kicked the door shut behind them with a soft click, shutting out the world, the past and the noise, leaving only the two of them in the quiet sanctuary they had chosen. In the days that followed, the fall of Ryan Blake dominated the news cycle. Blake Eyre indicted on federal fraud charges. Moretti wedding bombshell, groom arrested, ex-girlfriend vindicated. The footage of Ryan's confession and his subsequent arrest went viral. The public opinion, fickle as always, swung wildly in Emily's favor. She was no longer the crazy ex. She was the survivor who had stood tall while a tyrant crumbled. Ryan's father resigned from his company in disgrace. Charlotte Hale annulled the engagement and publicly donated the cost of the wedding to a charity supporting women's health, a quiet, classy nod of solidarity to Emily. Emily returned to work at Harborview Events the following Tuesday. She walked into the office wearing a tailored blazer and the diamond ring that never left her finger. She did not keep her head down. She met her colleague's eyes. "Good morning," she said to the receptionist, her voice clear and bright. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti," the receptionist stammered, looking at her with new respect. Emily smiled. It sounded good. Life with Adrian settled into a rhythm that was surprisingly domestic. True to his word. Adrian was home for dinner almost every night. He was still a busy man, still powerful, and still dangerous to those who crossed him, but the sharp edges of his life were softening. He took meetings in the office, but he took his mornings in the kitchen, drinking coffee and watching Emily read the news. 3 weeks after the wedding, they hosted a small dinner at Moretti's. It wasn't a gala or a publicity stunt, it was just a table in the corner for the people who mattered. Jenna was there, raising a glass of champagne and looking smugly satisfied with her role in encouraging Emily to attend the wedding. Marco was there, looking less like a bodyguard and more like a relaxed cousin, laughing at Jenna's jokes. And Adrian was there, sitting beside Emily, his arm draped casually over the back of her chair, to unexpected beginnings. Adrian toasted, raising his glass. "To fighting back," Jenna added with a grin. Emily raised her glass, the crystal catching the warm light of the restaurant. She looked around the table at the faces of her friends and her husband. She felt the steady, reassuring pressure of Adrian's hand on her knee under the table. She thought of the girl she had been 6 years ago, lonely, broken, hiding in a dorm room. That girl felt like a stranger now. The girl Ryan tried to erase was gone. In her place stood a woman who had walked through the fire and come out carrying a torch. She had chosen herself first, and then she had chosen a love that saw all her scars and didn't ask her to hide them. "To us," Emily whispered, looking at Adrian. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that was only for her. "To us," he agreed, and he drank, his eyes never leaving hers, promising a lifetime of safety, respect, and a love that was finally, wonderfully real. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey watching Emily reclaim her strength and find a love that protects rather than destroys. I hope you enjoyed the emotional twists and the justice served in the end. I would love to hear your thoughts on the finale. Did Ryan get what he deserved? And what did you think of Adrian's transformation from a contract husband to a true partner? Please let me know in the comments below and tell me where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow from all over the world. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. We have many more passionate, intense, and romantic stories coming your way. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next story.